Today, we're back on the Pro Touring all-wheel drive 2nd gen Chevy S10 project, and we're building a 100% custom 3-link rear suspension that'll fix our massive wheel hop issues. Last time, we removed the stock leaf springs and stripped the OEM brackets from the chassis. Plus, we got the new lower link mounts welded onto the frame and the axle tubes. In this video, we're going to finish things up by building the upper link mounts and welding them to the axle and the chassis. Plus, we'll weld up the links. And on top of that, we'll fix a few other factory defects that we found along the way. All the suspension parts that I'm using for this installation are based on off-road stuff. So they're like super heavy duty and kind of overkill, to be honest. And the link tower is no exception. It was designed to fit on the axle tube, but I'm going to be installing it on the axle housing in the middle, so I do need to cut the brackets up and kind of trim them to fit. But making a template and attacking them with a cutoff wheel gets the job done in a hurry, and the tab and slot design is still going to lock everything together nice and tight. With the first bracket taken care of, I'm working on the second bracket that's on the back half of it. Again, I traced it out onto cardboard, made the changes that I need to, and then transferred that back onto the original design, which is just a 1/4 inch thick piece of plate steel. Now, I am using the cutoff wheel exclusively here just because the plasma cutter that I have, it doesn't have quite enough horsepower to burn through this 1/4 on a single clean and easy pass, but I probably need to upgrade that in the future.
So I don't know why, but I've decided in my mind that the brackets are going to be TIG welded together, but then MIG welded to whatever component they're going to be stuck to. Don't ask me why, I don't know, it's just, yeah.
I got to admit, I am kind of a little bit obsessive when it comes to TIG welding. And I think it all goes back to when I was a younger guy reading Hot Rod magazine. And it was talking about, a list of, say, 10 things that every car builder should know how to do. And I think at the top of that list, it mentioned TIG welding. It was a skill that not everybody could do. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm the best welder in the world, not by a long shot. But I will say over the last 7 or 8 years, I have spent countless hours just sitting behind the TIG torch, learning and trying to perfect my skills. Obviously, they're not perfect, but I have spent way more time on the TIG than I have on the MIG, which is good, but also at the same time, my MIG welding skills, they definitely haven't progressed like they should. So that just means I need to practice the MIG now a whole lot more.
So these tab and slot design brackets, I really like them because they kind of help lock themselves in place, but as you can see, there's a little bit of play for holding this joint together. If you just go ahead and weld, put this in and bolt it down and weld it, when you take it apart, it's going to be a little bit too tight. So I got a couple old differential shims that I cut up, 10 thousandths each. I'm going to stack 2 together, make 20 thousandths, and that way we have exactly 20 thousandths extra gap when it's tight. But realistically, after the welds have cooled down, it's going to pull it in just a little bit, which will make a nice precise fit for easy assembly. Now obviously you don't want to do any like full-blown finish welding with the Heim joint in there, because there's like plastic or nylon in the center that would obviously get melted out, but I have a fix. So with all the shims out, we've got a nice precise fit. And to provide a little bit of rigidity while we weld, just going to take this kind of threaded rod and lock it in place.
After a little bit more time with the TIG machine getting the upper link bracket welded together, it was time to attach the bracket onto the housing. Now when I started cleaning the paint off, that's when I noticed the first factory defect that we were kind of talking about. Basically, where the axle tubes were plug welded into the housing from the factory, there was a pretty significant crack that I found and kind of a void in the factory weld, which I just figured was not something that I wanted, especially considering the link bracket was going to go on top of it. So I got the die grinder out. I removed as much of the factory weld as possible, which did take quite a while. But once I had everything cleaned out, I just took the MIG welder, cranked it up, and filled in the hole and got everything patched back together. And I think that's going to eliminate the crack and any potential future cracks that could stem from it. Definitely made me nervous welding to the cast center section there, but it looks so much better than it did before, and now we're ready to attach the link tower to the housing. A couple of guys asked me what welding wire I'm going to be using because it is a cast section, but it's cast steel, so I'm just using standard MIG wire. Maybe not the best option. There probably are some better things out there, but I've welded to center sections before just using standard MIG wire, and I haven't had any problems. It's the next day, all the welds have cooled down, and I am now breathing a huge sigh of relief because welding that link tower to the cast center section of this differential was the most stressful part of this entire build. It was like the one thing I was worried about, whether or not we could pull it off without any issues. I know it is cast steel, I know that we're able to weld to it, but you know, there's a fair amount of localized heat, and I probably should have maybe preheated the whole housing or something like that, but now that it's all cooled down, I gave it a really thorough check over. I didn't see any cracks forming, which is awesome. And now we're ready to move on to the next step. This is a pretty in-depth project that I've signed myself up here for. And I always find ways to make them, you know, these projects take even more time. But stuff like this, for example, like contouring the link bracket to fit around the center section of the differential. Don't look at those, by the way, they're kind of ugly. But this is a very time-consuming project, but in my brain it's totally worth it because I wanted to make sure we left room for exhaust, and that was the best way to do it. I could have taken the shortcut, welded the link tower right here and been done in like a fraction of the time, but now I have from here all the way to here, you know, minus the coilover, so we'll lose a little bit of space, but I have so much room for exhaust, and my brain says dual 3-inch is what we're going to fit back here, so I needed to make sure we left room. And that's one thing I always preach, guys, is if you have something you want to do, don't give up on the idea. Don't take a shortcut or don't cop out just because it's hard. Do the hard thing. Make it right. Make your brain happy. Or at least that's what I do. Anyway, next step, let's get this on the ground. We'll get it centered up under the truck. We'll get it, you know, squared up and all that. I'll then build the links to go from the front mounts to the lower. I will then build the upper mount that's going to sit somewhere right in there on that cross member. And we'll see how far we can get today, but I also would love to get the coilovers on. But let's just keep what am I trying to say? Let's keep going. That's what I'm saying.
Super heavy or not so heavy?
Yeah, it's not awful, but got it. Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
You got it.
So right now I'm just trying to get the axle back at its ride height. I like where the truck's at before. That's where all my measurements are based on. So we'll get it set there and then we can measure our lengths and stuff like that. So I want to show you this real quick just to give you an idea of how tight of tolerances we have to work with in order to make this suspension system do what I want. The upper links need to be a certain distance above axle center line in order to get us the geometry that we are after. But of course we have to work within the constraints of what we have. This level here represents a bed rib that sits right there. Obviously, we don't want the upper link to crash into that, or the bed floor. The back edge of the rib is here. As you can see, this link is just behind it, but the bed floor is about 1 inch above the bottom surface of that level right there. So the shocks I have, they run exactly 7 3/4 of an inch of travel. If I set this up so the shock is perfectly in the middle, 3 7/8 of an inch at ride height. Typically you want like 40%, so a little bit less. But let's say I do 3 7/8 of an inch and I have the link in the uppermost position, which it was designed around the middle hole, which gives us more room. But let's say for some reason I need to have it in the top hole. We are like splitting hairs here, but if we add 2.5 plus the inch, that's 3.5. Technically, I lose about 1/4, 3/8 of an inch of shock travel. And that's like 3 ifs. Number one, if we set it at 50% shock travel at ride height, if we have it on the uppermost mount, which we'll probably never have, and if we like hit a bump and completely smash this thing, you know, on like a pothole or whatever, that mount may kiss the bed floor. But to prevent that, we are gonna have some aftermarket bump stops that I'm gonna add. I'll cut the factory ones off because they're useless, but we'll do something like that just to prevent that from happening. But you gotta plan ahead, and that planning luckily has paid off. So anyway, measuring for links are next. 19 1/4. So I really enjoy Mexican food, and every Wednesday at the shop here we buy food for all the guys. And so this week's lunch we went to, or ordered from Alfonso's, 21st Street in Colorado Springs. If you're local, I guess. If you're not from here, it won't matter. But this is a really awesome burrito. It's Colorado burrito, fitting for the state that I live in. It's got French fries and steak and onions and peppers. It's kind of like fajitas in a burrito with French fries. And you got to get the spicy salsa. This stuff is real good. So when you weld these tube nuts in here, you obviously get stuff nice and hot. Now the only problem with steel getting nice and hot is it warps. So these do not thread in super easy by hand. So I just went on Amazon and I found 2 thread taps, one left hand, one right hand. This is an 1.25 inch by 12 thread pitch. But on the other link, I just put a little wrench on there, and just with a tiny bit of pressure, I was able to kind of get it to turn through, and it cleared itself out. So let's give it a shot. So it goes in free, probably to about the weld area. See what we got. Yeah, this might have to turn quite a bit harder, so I'm not going to force it. That's all right. We got the thread tap on the way. I'll chase that out, and then we'll be back in business a couple days later. So I'm still not used to the fact that someone will come and deliver this stuff overnight, but I guess kind of thankful for it. There's a drill bit for something else. There's an 1.25 inch tab. Now they only had the right hand tap available for next day. The left hand tap is going to be here tomorrow, but get this thing chased out. Before the rod end would only go in that far, so hopefully we get it all the way now. Doesn't take much, just clean those threads up. Much better. All right, tomorrow the other one should be here. We'll fix the other side. It's a new day and we are cranking right along on this 3-link. We did get a little bit sidetracked with welding that cross member together, but this from the factory, its only purpose was to hold up the fuel tank and then provide a little bit of lateral support. But now, since we're using this as a part or a member of the suspension, that whole unwelded part back here just wasn't going to cut it. Because like I said, this was the only factory welded part on the back. So now we have it 100% solid welded together. We have it welded to the frame on both top sides. And I haven't done the bottom yet, but I will weld the bottom of the cross member to the frame. And then there's a few extra places, which since I'm kind of going down that rabbit hole on this side and on this side, like the factory welds just don't inspire confidence or joy. So we'll probably touch up a lot of that. Again, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. But anyhow, we have one major part left before we have the 3 links done, not counting the panhard bar. That's building the bracket for the upper link on the chassis side. So now that we have welding done, we can address this. Between the little hash marks here, that's where the drive shaft is going to be. So obviously we can't come anywhere near that. This blue mark here, that's kind of where the factory exhaust hanger bolts onto this cross member. This is, you know, we can work by moving this a little bit if we have to, but I'm going to try to keep it. But basically a straight shot from here back puts the upper link mount right here. So
I'm going to use the Barnes 4-wheel drive adjustable link tower. It does have to be shortened just a little bit, but the measurement I took from this top hole to the center would be, or to the base, was 2 1/4. And then I'm going to kind of cut an L shape out so this can go up the back of the cross member just to add a little bit more strength. So a little more cutting, grinding, and welding, and we're almost in the home stretch, sort of.
All right, so we just finished TIG welding the upper frame mount bracket together, and while we wait for that to cool down, I am going to get one end welded on the upper link, and then when this is cooling down, we can be working on that, getting it attached to the frame, because I am ready to get this thing done. .6, 90.7. We'll take it. It is now Saturday. We are headed back to the shop to get one last thing finished up, and we'll get those links installed. I just got the left-hand thread tap that I need to get the left-hand threads and the tube nuts chased out and get the links in all the way. And this is kind of like a big moment because this is my first 3-link suspension that I've ever built, and this will be the first time the 3 links are actually underneath the truck. So this project definitely takes a lot more time than I think I initially anticipated, but then again, I shouldn't be surprised because all my projects tend to evolve and drag out and take a whole lot of time. But I can't complain because it's Saturday, it's a beautiful day, it's like 60 degrees out right now, which is awesome because it's been in the 90s lately. We got the ugly truck out, we're going for a cruise, so life is awesome. All right, you gotta love Amazon in these situations because this is a pretty big thread tap. The equivalent from Granger, I think, was like $350, which I'm just chasing threads. I'm not even cutting new threads, so this $50 guy from Amazon is going to work beautifully.
Boom, right on the money.
Look at that.
It's taken about 2 full weeks of work to get to this point, and we're not even done with the rear suspension. All we have is 3 links mounted to the axle and to the frame. But seeing it for the first time fully put together is like the confirmation that I needed that a full custom suspension is the best choice, because I did spend quite a bit of time ahead of the project looking for a bolt-on solution, which really didn't exist, especially for a 4-wheel drive S10. There's a lot of universal airbag stuff out there, which just is not gonna cut it. Ritech does make a bolt-on 3-link wishbone setup for 2-wheel drive S10, but the frames are just different enough where I would have had to modify that anyway. So I would have rather started from scratch like we did now and have a result that has, to me, 0 compromises. First, it matches all the geometry that I needed or wanted. It has adjustment built in, so if that 75% anti-squat isn't gonna react how I want it, we can adjust it up and down from there. This suspension fits around all of the factory stuff, like the fuel tank, the charcoal canister, even exhaust. We've left space for that, which it did take a lot of time to build that mount and offset it, but look at all the room we have to run exhaust. And you know, for you, if that's not a priority, then well, that's fine. But for me, I had like a checklist of things that this suspension system had to do. And even though it's taken 2 weeks, I am happy that we're where we're at. A couple things that we have left to do. Number one is we need a way to locate the axle laterally, because right now these 3 links are parallel and the axle could just flop around left and right. There's nothing to hold it. So we got to build a panhard bar, which I'm going to be using on the frame side. This was Rough Stuff Specialties. Going to be using that bracket sort of like that. And then on the axle side, it's going to be a fully custom bracket that looks sort of kind of like that. It's going to go somewhere in there. And then the shock mounts, that'll be probably a little bit easier because we have the QA1 heavy duty lower mounts already done. Just gonna weld those to the axle. And then up here, this is gonna be all custom. We're gonna build a cross member that puts the top of the shock just a little bit above the frame and below the surface of the bed, because I got the longest shock I could package for the most travel, so we just need to utilize every inch of space. Stock shock mounts get chopped off. The the custom sway bar mounts that I built, those are gonna go as well. But yeah, I'm just like super pumped to actually see this in person, and I can't wait to drive this thing, because in theory it's all gonna work well, but theory and practice are 2 different things. But I think we've put enough research into this ahead of time so we know it's going to work. We might have to fine tune like spring rate and stuff like that, or adjust the bar angle a little bit. But yeah, I'm really, really pumped, guys, and I can't wait to get this thing done. I can't wait to get the LS swapped into it. And then that'll be phase 1, because phase 2, or whatever the next phase is going to involve forced induction. So we can actually put some of this beefy suspension to work, because this is like so overkill. I've got, this is the lower and upper link material right here. It's 2-inch OD, 250 wall tube, and this stuff is heavy, but I'm probably never ever gonna break it. Even if the truck weighed like 7,000 pounds, and if I had like 4,000 horsepower on slicks, I think this suspension would hold up to anything I could throw at it, much less with a 700 horsepower engine and a 3,900 pound truck. So really, really happy. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it, because you are the reason that I'm able to do stuff like this. Spend 2 weeks on a stupid suspension project, because realistically there's other stuff in the world going on that's way more important than me sitting in the shop welding. But very grateful for the opportunity and ability to do this. Hope you guys have a great 4th of July holiday. Make sure you keep all your fingers and toes if you're playing with fireworks. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you guys. Come back soon for more fabrication and more fun truck projects.